So the other day, Teresa and I were listening to Ellen White's book, Education. And in case you don't know who Teresa is, she's my wife and also my partner in everything, which is really awesome. Anyway, as we were listening, we came across this statement. The mind, the heart that is indolent, aimless, falls an easy prey to evil. That's from Education, page 189. It made me think of how some have trouble keeping their mind from wandering during self-examination. As you may know, the branch message teaches us to engage in self-examination each day. And like most things, it takes time to discipline the mind to focus in this way. Whether when attempting to self-examine or at any other time, an unfocused mind will tend to run in different directions, maybe even undesirable ones, and it can be all too easy to look on the negative side of things. This is also known as negativity bias. A slightly different yet related sort of experience is when people try to overcome the temptation to think in a certain way by merely thinking, I don't want to think in that way. But as long as the content of your thoughts is that you don't want to think a certain way, you'll be stuck making evasive maneuvers, like being chased by your thoughts around a table. The better way is to focus your thoughts on something specific. If you're tempted to think in a way that isn't good, you can focus on the truths that counter those thoughts. This, in effect, undermines the way of thinking that you're trying to overcome. When you genuinely see why that way of thinking is erroneous, it loses its power. Likewise, when engaging in self-examination, you'll get a lot more out of it if you're focused on something specific rather than aimlessly wondering about what improvements you might be able to make. So how can we keep focused? How can we keep our minds from wandering during self-examination? On one hand, willpower certainly plays a role. As we discipline ourselves, it becomes easier and easier to focus. But there's another thing that can really help: mirrors. Obviously, I'm not talking about mirrors of metal and glass. I'm speaking metaphorically about mirrors of self-examination. Just as we can use mirrors to help us examine our external appearance, we can use another sort of mirror to help us examine our character. In the book of James in the New Testament, it actually talks about one such mirror. This is in James chapter 1, verses 22 to 25. But be sure you live out the message and do not merely listen to it and so deceive yourselves. For if someone merely listens to the message and does not live it out, he is like someone who gazes at his own face in a mirror. For he gazes at himself and then goes out and immediately forgets what sort of person he was. But the one who peers into the perfect law of liberty and fixes his attention there and does not become a forgetful listener, but one who lives it out, he will be blessed in what he does. By the way, that's from the New English Translation, or NET. Notice that this passage uses a mirror as an analogy. Did you catch what it uses it as an analogy for? In verse 23, it's the message, or the word in other translations. Then in verse 25, it's the perfect law of liberty. Evidently, James is using the two phrases, the law of liberty and the message, to refer to the same thing. And this makes sense, given that the book of James falls in the genre of Jewish wisdom literature, in which the word law, or Torah, is used with its literal meaning, that is, teaching or instruction. So the law is really the teaching, which I'm sure you can see makes sense as a synonym for message. So how does the message or teaching or instruction of God serve as a mirror? Well, by studying it, we are brought face to face with whether we are living in harmony with it or not. If God's instruction says, you must not lie, but we do lie, looking at that instruction reveals our flaw. If the message says, love your enemy, but we don't love our enemy, focusing on that message shows us where we err. And as I hope is already clear from what I just explained about the word law, the message or law here is not just legal codes. It's the entirety of what God has revealed in messages he has given to save us. So when it comes to self-examination, I recommend taking a passage in the writings of a prophet and reading it. Focus on it and be honest with it, and of course with yourself. Let it show you your defects and thus lead you to see your need of a savior. whether it be the writings of Jeremiah, Hosea, the teacher of righteousness, who is a prophet known from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And if you haven't heard of him before, definitely check into the teacher of righteousness. Just do a search on our YouTube channel, Branch Davidian SDA, or on our website, bdsda.com. Anyway, whether it be his writings or the writings of Jeremiah or Hosea or Paul or John the Revelator, Ellen White, or some other, every inspired writing is useful for teaching, reproof, correction, and training in righteousness, in order that you may be competent and equipped for every good work, as a certain passage says. So, the law or message of God is like a mirror for us. It can show us our own defects. But we also have another mirror. In another text that is unfortunately not that well known, but which I definitely recommend reading, that is the Odes of Solomon, it says, "Behold, the Lord is our mirror. Open your eyes and see them in him." That's Ode 13, verse 1. And the translation is the one found in the Old Testament pseudepigrapha edited by James Charlesworth. You can find it on Amazon. It's pretty cheap. And also, if you use Logos Bible software, they have it there as well. So, in this passage, the Lord is our mirror. The Lord here being clearly, from the context of the Odes, Jesus. So, how is Jesus our mirror? Well, the first thing I should say is that it's by studying the historical Jesus that we have a perfect mirror before us. By beholding his character, the flaws in our own characters become manifest or revealed. Even in areas where we might not be technically flawed, he provides for us a standard of character to which we can aspire, and to which, through choosing truth, we can attain. Consider, for example, how Jesus spoke of John the Baptist, and how he said that his disciples could do greater works than he did. That's in John 14:12, by the way. Or how he admonished them to become better than him, if possible, as it says in the Apocryphon of James. All of this is stuff that we can show to be true about the historical Jesus, and what it shows is that Jesus' character contained no jealousy, no striving for supremacy. Do ours? Or does he, as our mirror, reveal something in us that needs to be removed? If yes, let's remove it and conform ourselves to the model character, to Jesus' character. And of course, this whole thing about jealousy and striving for supremacy is just one example among many that could be given of how Jesus' character really is the perfect standard. Lastly, the heart is deceitful above all things, as it says in Jeremiah 17:9. If in self-examination we use for our mirror our own heart, our own thoughts, our own opinions, our own conscience, we could easily deceive ourselves. So, instead, let's use the truths given in inspired message after inspired message, and let's use the character of Jesus. We need to make these things, the character of Jesus and the messages that God has given over and over again through successive prophets throughout the generations, we need to make these things our mirrors and have them be our daily companions for self-examination. If we do so, we'll come to see ourselves and our need far more clearly. I hope that you find this to be a really helpful piece of advice. I know that it really can benefit people. There's just so much wisdom in the messages that God has sent and in the character of Jesus that we won't be able to come up with just by looking into our own hearts. Another place that I have to recommend is read Ellen White's Testimonies for the Church. Seriously, there's a lot of really, really good counsel there and reproof, and that's what we need, right? Like, if we are ever to develop a righteous character, we need to have anything that is not right in our character righted or corrected. And again, the Testimonies for the Church that Ellen White wrote are just really, really good. So check that out. And also check out Teresa's channel, Timeless Testimonies. She goes through quite a number of things that Ellen White talked about. Anyway, if you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, please do so. Also, as a reminder, in the show notes for each episode, there will be a link to the blog post. And if you want to comment or ask a question, you can do so directly on the blog post.